and especially Dr. Jad Melki for his kind invitation. I first attended the MD Lab when it started, 2013, and this is my second time presenting here. So I really appreciate being back to Beirut. It's a really lovely city. Okay, so as Jad mentioned, my presentation is about misinformation in the Middle East. I'll just say something in Arabic, sorry for the translators. بالبداية أعتذر أنه أتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية، لكن السبب الوحيد اللي اضطريت بي أتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية بهذه المحاضرة أنه صعوبة ترجمة المصطلحات اللي راح أذكرها وتداولها في المحاضرة. فعلى سبيل المثال من بعض المصطلحات الموجودة هي fake news أو disinformation, misinformation، وباللغة العربية كما تجدون هناك قائمة طويلة من هذه المصطلحات. لأنني لست متخصصا في الترجمة ارتئيت أن أتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية، لكن أعتذر بهذا الخصوص. مرة ثانية معظم المصطلحات أتكلم عنها هي فقط يعني مذكورة أو بها تفاصيل كثيرة باللغة الإنجليزية وليس باللغة العربية. Okay. Now, so why do we study misinformation in general? I think, as Jad mentioned in his interesting lecture, there should be an urgent attention to this study. Because during public health emergencies and times of conflict, we really need to be wary about the kind of information that we consume. This is actually, as Jad said, a matter of life and death. It's not a joke. I mentioned this before and I'll continue talking about it. Misinformation can kill people. If you have the wrong information about different things, it can actually lead to your death. As simple as that. For example, if you do not believe that the pandemic exists, you are more likely to risk your life by not getting vaccinated or by following very risky life practices that might lead to your death. As simple as that. In other words, information is vital, and misinformation can actually lead to people's death. So today, as again Jad talked about the term infodemic, it's a combination of information and pandemic, and this is what we are actually living in. Just a note about infodemic. I think we've been living in infodemics for a very long time. I don't think it's a new thing, especially for our region. It's been ongoing for decades, I believe, even from the beginning of time. When civilization started, people kept on lying to each other. It's part of who we are as human beings. It's probably a survival tool, and that's why we disseminate fake information to each other. Of course, today we have a problem, and this has been ongoing, especially in the Western world. There is an ongoing mistrust in authorities. And when I say authorities, it includes the news industry, politicians included, as well as health authorities. I mean, I'm very glad to hear that the situation in Lebanon is good in terms of trust in doctors, at least today. But if you look at other parts of the world, including the country where I come from, Canada, there is an increasing mistrust in authorities. And as I said, these could be three types of authorities: the news industry, and the news industry, as well as politicians and health authorities. Okay. So please bear with me. I just want to cover a few conceptual issues, like just theoretical issues, before I plunge into misinformation in the Middle East. I'm going to talk about my own research. So what you see here is not like something found elsewhere. It's just what I have been doing about the Middle East region and misinformation. But before that, I really need to talk about what misinformation, fake news is, and then I will talk about the details. Okay, so this is a standard, let's say, classification of what fake news refers to. And this is from Tanduk and Ling study. They looked at previous research on the term fake news, الأخبار الزائفة, whatever you want to call it in Arabic. And they found there are like 6 main typologies, or let's say types of fake news as discussed by previous scholars. Notice the last one, propaganda, الدعاية. This is definitely overlapping with disinformation, and I will talk about it when I discuss the war in Ukraine in the coming slides. But there are other ones like manipulation, fabrication, which is close, parody, and satire. So it's used in different ways, depending, of course, on context and depending on the intention. So the other thing is the difference between these two terms, mis and disinformation. And this is the reason why I am talking to you in English. It's because I really had a problem translating these two terms into Arabic. But I talked to the translators before, and they told me there is actually a distinction made in Arabic between these two terms. It's great, but I was not aware of it, because usually I study in English. But the difference is actually mentioned by Jad. So from the word misinformation, it means the dissemination of false information without knowing it's false. You don't know really it's false, misinformation. Whereas the word disinformation with D-I-S, it means you really know that the information is false and you intentionally disseminate it. Sounds good? So mis means you don't know. You disseminate it. This means you really know and you intentionally want to deceive people. It's really easy. But I have a problem with that. How do we know people's intentions? We cannot go into their minds, and people lie. They lie to us. Even if you ask them, do you really know that this is false? They might say yes or no. They lie, depending on the circumstances. So I have a problem with actually this kind of distinction between these two terms, which is why I'm suggesting maybe introducing another term to make it probably easier, or maybe even more difficult for everyone. So yeah, these are the definitions. But in general, today, information is weaponized. I think, again, it's not only today, it's been weaponized for a very long time. You know, I think, again, Jad mentioned this in his presentation. Some people think information is just information. It's just like a waste of time, or probably not that important, because it's not tangible, you know what I mean? It's not something you can touch. It's not something you can hold in your hand. It's just what I call a cultural commodity. But it has a great deal of importance and impact on our lives, which is why it's been weaponized. And this kind of weaponization could affect public policies and change people's views. As I said, it can actually even kill people. Now, the same thing applies to fake news and disinformation and the way it's been weaponized by politicians. Best example is from the United States. Former President of the United States, Donald Trump, used the word fake news against journalists to discredit them. And it has definitely some kind of sensational nature. Today, however, we have two main problems with the weaponization of information. I listed them here. The first one is astroturfing. Okay, I don't know how this will be translated, but astroturfing means you send information without disclosing your identity. Again, astroturfing means you send information to people without telling them who you really are. You can say so, but you can be hiding behind an avatar, or let's say a persona, which is something online, but in true you probably are related to a state or government. That's a huge problem we have today, astroturfing, because we really don't know a lot. We have very little information about who is doing it. the astroturfing techniques. Second is micro-targeting. I think this is easily translated. It means because of social media, those people, I call them bad actors, are increasingly able to micro-target their audiences, which means they specifically send messages to people in different places based on their ideological backgrounds and interests. Okay? So these are the two things or challenges that we have today when it comes to social media and misinformation. It's a huge thing. Let me give you an example of micro-targeting. Russians. I have no problem with the Russians, but when I looked at their own propaganda targeting the Arab world in Arabic, they were very favorable of Muslims and Islam in Arabic. However, when I looked at Russian trolls targeting audiences in the West using English language, they were really terrible talking about Muslims and Islam, because they were talking about different audiences. Whereas when they talked to Arab audiences, they were really nice. So this is a kind of what we call micro-targeting in the way they change their messages to adapt to the needs of the audiences. And again, attract their attention, appeal to what they really want to hear. And then, of course, pass the favorable messages, the things they want to talk to them. This is a technique usually used by major players, state-run trolls around the world, including, of course, in the United States. Okay. Now, why do they do that? There are different motivations to do so. Some of them are ideologically motivated. Some of them are related to the state. Sometimes people are just doing it for financial gain, maybe. We looked at previous research on the term fake news. Okay, by the way, I'm used to this. I'm from Iraq, so this is just normal. And they found there are like 6 million. Could be also for fun. Some people just make it for fun, as when they talk just want to audience good time by so this is information kind of what we deceive people targeting in the way we really don't know. So remember what I said about intentionality in the beginning? The intentions behind spreading fake news? We really don't know. Even if you ask them, like, why do you do that? If that person is part of a state, or a nation state, they might say, no, I'm just doing it for fun or for money. You really don't know that. But there are like some of them listed here. I think Jad talked about sectarianism. I call it polarized politics. Probably a better term, which could be applied to Jordan. I think one of the people here from Jordan mentioned that. So polarization might explain to you why certain types of fake news spreads in the same country. And this also explains even within, let's say, ethnic homogeneous countries like Jordan. Okay. So another problem I have with the word fake news and misinformation. After the election of Donald Trump in 2016, the term fake news became so popular. Now, you can look at statistics, you can look at data, and you see suddenly the popularity of the term went up. People started talking about fake news being a problem. But we forget that fake news has been done for a long time, as I said, since the beginning of time. And I would like to go back to the Iraq War 2003. I was there 2003, the US invaded the country under the pretext that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It's completely false, all fake news, and they knew it. Yet, no one talked about it as fake news, nothing. It was just like normal. Okay, yeah, we made a mistake. Like, which mistake? Almost 1 million people died because of this mistake. So talking about prejudice, talking about bias, talking about double standards, I think this is a good case, because 2003 fake news did not become something important because it did not concern the United States and the Western world. It concerned us here in the Middle East. So yeah, well, they made a mistake, but it's big. That's why I kept on reminding people that you should go back. You should go back to 2003 and even before that in order to study fake news. Don't study it after Trump, study it before that. Yeah. So in my book, just I'm trying to promote probably my book here, sorry for that. But really, in my book, I wrote a long time ago, before Trump, before everyone came, before the discussion, I had actually a whole chapter about the US attempt to fake the war. They actually used, and this is in one of my chapters in my book, they used news clips, news articles from Iraqi newspapers to show that Iraq was connected to Al-Qaeda, and Iraq knew about 9/11 before that. Completely false, completely fake, and they even discussed it in the Congress. Now, funny thing is that, in my mind, this is really important because this was before fake news, but no one ever mentions it, no one ever reads about it, which makes me think that fake news is fake news when it concerns the West, but not us. So then again, we talk about double standards. Okay. Again, sorry, I'm talking about too much about in relation to the concept of fake news, but this is the model that I have introduced around cyber operations. I know it looks complicated, but today, in order to explain what is going on, nation states are involved in attacking others, like governments, and I have them there in the top, nation state. And then, of course, we have other people in between. And now, I don't think I will have time to explain this, but it's in my book, which is called Cyber Wars in the Middle East, where I talked about it in details. But I just wanted to show you that I've been really struggling to figure out what is going on in this information ecosystem. Which makes me, this is my, I think, last slide on the concept. This is what I think, or what I introduced, a term I call disruptive information. I don't know how this will be translated again. But disruptive information is something that has the potential of creating, whether intentionally or not, some kind of psychological, emotional, political, or social disruption in the status quo. So no matter what the intention is, they want to create some kind of disruption, make you feel confused, maybe, distracted, maybe mobilized. Probably this is the ultimate goal. If they can mobilize you with information, then they achieve their goal. And I call this a communication strategies that is introduced because a lot of these terms actually lost their meanings, like fake news. Again, I'm talking in English, not in Arabic. Probably in Arabic, the terms are a bit different. Again, أخبار المضللة and أخبار الزائفة, I'm not really exactly sure about the difference in people's minds about these two terms. I honestly think there is an overlap. That's why I'm focusing on the English ones. Okay, that's it for me for the concepts. Now I'm going to talk about the case studies. So I'm going to talk about 4 case studies. These are the ones listed here, whereby I explored this misinformation in the Middle East. COVID-19 definitely is the first one, followed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Staterun trolls, or in Arabic, الذباب الإلكتروني, electronic flies, and in the end, Jamal Khashoggi, مقتل Jamal Khashoggi. And most of these have already been published, like in peer-reviewed publications, except for the first one, still being under review. Okay, COVID-19, what did I do? So before proceeding, Jad focuses on surveys, which is great. I'm actually complementing his research by using big data and social media data from different platforms. Okay, and that's what I do. Like, I use digital tools in order to find empirical insight into what is being discussed. So nothing from my pocket, everything that is found is in the data. Like, I don't invent anything. I show you what I have found. And by the way, this reminds me of my workshop. The workshop that I will be given after lunch will be purely academic. So it's research. If you are not into research, academic research, it might not be that suitable for you. That's just a warning or disclaimer. So please put that in mind, because it might be boring, since I'm going to talk about not investigative journalism, but purely academic research procedures. Okay. Now, COVID-19. So I was interested to see what people were saying about COVID-19, say misinformation, with regard to certain Arabic hashtags. So these are the Arabic hashtags. لا للتطعيم الإجباري، الحرية الطبية. You can see them. Yeah, I don't need to read them for you. But I collected everything discussed, and that's what I do. Like as I said, I use digital methods to collect data, and I have the means to do so. So how many did I collect? Almost 500,000 tweets, mostly posted in 2021. And then, because the data set is too large, we looked at the most retweeted, the most retweeted 1,000 messages from Twitter. And that's the chart showing you the discussion that happens. I don't know why, but most of these hashtags, most of these tweets were actually posted or let's say, shared in Kuwait. I don't know why. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But that's what I have found. Kuwait seems to be the top country discussing these things, like some kind of mistrust in vaccination campaigns and so on. If anyone knows why, I'll be very happy to, take that into account. Okay, so the second step was the challenging one, trying to figure out what is being said in these tweets. So together with our research assistants at my university in Canada, we worked on figuring out what people are saying in Arabic about these hashtags. This is the codebook that we have developed. So the first category, by the way, this is content analysis. This is the systematic content analysis procedure that we have followed here. The first one is infringing on civil liberties. And what else? Or perceived online censorship. This is the first thing they discussed in details. And, the second one is call for action, or even news about lockdowns around the world. So they were talking about, let's go out on a rally, let's protest, let's object, and so on. Again, I don't know why Kuwait. Kuwait seems to be the top country discussing these things. Don't know. Other things, but also when it comes to vaccine conspiracy theories, we found different types. 5 types. The first one is deep state, which I found interesting because this is a term used actually in North America. Suddenly now it's being discussed in the Middle East. Again, it seems that it's really global. I don't know how this will be translated, but it means a state within a state. دولة العميلة. But دولة العميلة العميقة. But it doesn't sound like an Arabic term, الدولة العميقة. I know it's a literal translation. Again, I'm struggling to figure out what to say in Arabic if I'm using this in Arabic. That's why I prefer to use the English language. الدولة العميقة. It sounds I don't know. But in all cases, they also talk about the New World Order, which is again, it's a Western term applied here in the Middle East. 2, the government or pharmaceutical companies are profiting from vaccines. That was another very prominent thing. What else? Attacking health authorities as well as medical authorities. Mistrusting, number 4 was very, very prominent and prevalent. Mistrusting vaccine efficacy and the effectiveness of the vaccine itself. In other words, vaccines don't work, so don't worry getting vaccinated. And then the last one, unproven treatments. You don't need to take the vaccine, just eat bananas, as Jad mentioned, or eat healthy food or exercise, and you'll be just fine. Which is, by the way, really risky, because if you do so, you can actually risk your life. So that's why I'm saying misinformation about COVID-19 might be disastrous. So these are some of the hashtags لا للتطعيم إجباري، سنة كاملة قبل الحلول، سمعت عن حاجز هذا الحوامل and so on and so forth. العهر الأخلاقي, propaganda, تطعيم الكاذب. I like this one, the تطعيم الكاذب. It's like COVID with كذب, which is like a combination of the two. But also I noticed that a lot of those people are citing doctors. Some of the doctors who don't think that the pandemic even exists. And that's a problem because we talk about fake experts. Even if they are doctors, they are not experts in vaccination. So they could actually pose another threat to public health authorities because they have the appearance of experts, but in true life, they don't know a lot about vaccines. They're probably good at what they do as physicians, but not in the field of vaccination. Okay, see, these are the findings that we have found. And we, for example, we found number 4 when it comes to vaccine conspiracies. Sorry, I used to have like laser pointer, but this one is one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, mistrusting vaccine efficacy. In other words, don't care about vaccine, doesn't work, don't even use it. What else? It was number 1, infringing on civil liberties, that you have no right to impose any kind of vaccine on me. I have all the freedom, it's against my civil liberties, and you are preventing me from traveling and so on. So that was another prominent theme that we have found. And of course, it will be number 2, government's intentional chaos. That was another thing. It's like the government is intentionally trying to disrupt the status quo. Don't trust the government and whatever the government says. Again, this was mostly mentioned. So that's what we have on Twitter. But of course, there are other platforms that could be very prominent, like Instagram, today Telegram, and so on. So the field is really, really wide for you if you are interested in studying misinformation in the Middle East by focusing on different social media. I think there are so many opportunities if you are interested in doing research on this. The sky is the limit, and we have very little people doing that kind of research. Okay. Now you might say, this is only happening in the Middle East, it's very confined, it's very limited. But I want to show you one slide from Canada. This is a study I did. It's an ongoing research about a protest we had in Ottawa. This is the capital of Canada. It's called the Truckers' Convoy Protest. We have truckers who actually blocked the capital, and they even blocked the border. So they paralyzed the whole country. I'm not joking, like the country lost billions of dollars because of them. They were saying you don't have any right to mandate vaccines, and you are, it's exactly the same discussion. You are infringing our liberties, and so on and so forth. Interestingly, I also collected all the data, discussing them, trying to support them. Something shook me, or let's say surprised me, was this. I looked at the languages used when discussing the protest in Ottawa. Far away, by the way. You know, it took me maybe 14 hours to be here. Really, 14 hours by plane. It's so far. It's there. It's so far. You know, but I found actually the 9th most used language was Arabic. The 9th most used language discussing the protest in Canada. Far away. Like, it's Canada. Like, seriously, it's so cold. Who cares about Canada? But they were talking about the same thing. It's exactly the same topics that I have found in my previous research. So these are some of the tweets they usually, let's say, discussed. The مظاهرات المليونية, you know, trying to promote the protest, and also talking about الإعلام كالشيطان الأخرس, which is interesting. You know, mistrusting mainstream media. It's interesting. What else? And here about more than 1 million infected people because of the vaccine, بسبب اللقاح. Again, trying to cast doubt about the efficacy and effectiveness of the vaccine. all in relation to the protest in Ottawa. Okay, so that's the first study. I hope I have time. Okay, I think I have time. It's perfect. So I'll move on to the second study, which is, of course, what is happening today in Ukraine. Now, remember when we talk about disinformation, it's actually overlapping with the word propaganda. And here, it's mostly propaganda. Okay, so just to be clear, Russia invaded Ukraine, not the opposite, okay? And the Russians are the aggressors in this conflict. Now, I know there might be different let's say, preferences about who is wrong, who's right. That's not my concern. My concern is looking at what is being discussed on social media in relation to the conflict. So, I started with something very simple, really simple. I wanted to see the discussion around these hashtags that support the invasion of Ukraine by the Russians. These are the ones. Putin زعيم أحرار العالم. We are with Russia, الحق مع روسيا, and so on. So from early 2022, because as you know, the invasion happened, I think in February, until April 3rd, which is when I conducted this study. So it's simple, right? Again, notice here, I'm not imposing my view. I'm just trying to collect the data and try to see what is going on, what kind of discussion we have around this issue. Now, when I looked at, and this is something interesting, when I looked at who is mostly mentioned in these tweets, like, okay, people are talking about support for Russia, okay, who are they mostly tagging or mentioning or referring to? That's what I found. The Russian embassy in Egypt, I don't know why, is the most mentioned prominent user that all of them refer to. And the Russian embassy in Egypt also is one of the active people talking about the Russian invasion being justified, being a good thing. Because they are saying, well, that's our narrative, we are fighting Nazis and so on. So again, notice here the overlap between propaganda and fake news. What else? Of course, I found the Russian Foreign Affairs in Arabic to be very prominent, and interestingly, the Chinese embassy in Moscow was also highly cited. So these are the major players that are in control of the discussion on social media with regard to the invasion of Ukraine. Which makes you think, okay, it seems that this is like orchestrated. This seems that controlled by these players. But let me show you, for instance, the most replied to and liked tweet. This is the one. And this is from the Russian embassy in Egypt. This is the most popular tweet that I have found in the whole data set. So it shows that there is like polarization about this issue. So the Russian on the one hand promoting a narrative, the Americans and the allies promoting another narrative. And that's what we have today. Two parties conflicting, you know, and clashing. Okay. Now, remember I collected the hashtags on these on these tweets supporting Russia, right? Now I wanted to do something also simple, very simple. I wanted to see when were these accounts created. Simple, right? These tweets that support the Russians, I just wanted to see when were these accounts created. You can create an account, as you know, on Twitter. Have a look at this. So, the account creation dates sound really suspicious because they suddenly had a climax when in February 2022. That's a few days after the invasion of Ukraine. You might say it's a coincidence, maybe, but for me it is an indication of something really suspicious or maybe inauthentic coordinated behavior, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I counted these accounts. So there were 28,000 tweets posted by 10,000 unique users who supported Russia in general. This is the total. Have a look at this. From these 7,000 accounts, amounting to 73% of users were created in early 2022, immediately after the invasion of Ukraine. Could this be a coincidence? Okay. Almost 4,000 accounts, almost 42,000 were created in one day only. Okay, this is really suspicious. I can get a lot of information, I can accept, but you know, having 4,000 accounts, correct? Yeah, over 4,000 accounts in one day to support one cause is too much for me. And in Arabic, it's not like in English. I would say, yeah, in English there's a global language, but in Arabic, so that was really suspicious. And about 500 accounts were created on another day, which is March 8th. So, you know, again, talking about big data analysis, I think sometimes with big data you can find some other types of insight like this one. Again, nothing from my pocket, I'm just looking at the data I collected. I'm not imposing anything from my own view, like we all have our own biases. Yes, that's true. No, but you know, others accuse us sometimes that, yeah, you are biased, you are subjective, you are limited. Well, this is the data. If you have another opinion, please tell me, show me. This is what the data is saying. Okay. I wanted to see also who's the most active one. This is the guy, I think a guy, I don't know. Yeah, well, I did a lot of research on this account. I couldn't find anything. The account, notice, was created in February 2022. And see, February 2022 means just a few months ago. See how many tweets that person sent? 25,000. Like, I have an account on Twitter. I think I maybe sent 20 messages so far for years. Maybe. But 25,000 in just, by the way, I collected this in April, so. And he sent only on Russia supporting Putin 4,200 messages.
He retweets every reply, he retweets
Yeah.
every tweet he sees, every picture,
Yeah.
every reply.
It's a champion. It's a champion. بطل هذا. But I did some kind of reverse image search on the image. Couldn't find anything. I really like his socks, which are white. جواريبة بيضة يعني كثير حلوة, بس I couldn't find anything, nothing. Like there is no indication of who this person is, which makes him suspicious. Okay, now among the things which is interesting, I think, that Russian embassy in Egypt and other embassies are doing, which is, I think, a new way of waging cyber informations. Now the embassies are involved. Used to be Russia Today, Russia اليوم, or Al-Hurra, or maybe South America, Voice of America, or Sputnik. But today it's like the embassies are really involved in everything happening. So they actually have a website, the Russians, called War on Fakes. الحرب على ما أعرف كيف ترجمها الشيء الزائف ما أعرف أخبار الزائفة. And it's in different languages. See the languages? English, French, German, Spanish, I think that is Chinese, yes, and Arabic, which explains to you why or which audiences they really want to target. Six types of audiences. Interestingly, not in Russian. I don't know why, but it seems that this is the intention. Intention is to target foreign audiences. So if you look at this website, anything that is discussed in the Western media, like in America or let's say in Canada, will be discredited on these websites, and vice versa. So what we have today is, as I said, it's an information warfare, حرب إعلامية, waged among different parties. So we have different groups, clusters of countries trying to promote narratives. And usually the Middle East will be the receiving end of these information warfare campaigns, usually, because almost all of them have media outlets in Arabic targeting us. So that's probably something we need to take into account. Yeah, okay. Now, And so this is my second case. Let's go to the third case, which is state-run trolls or electronic flies. You know a lot about it, I'm quite sure. الذباب الإلكتروني, you've heard a lot about it. But I'm going to just to show you a few examples on what they've done. And I'm using data sets released by Twitter. I did a lot of big data analysis. I'm talking about terabytes of data. And so these are some examples of the Saudi trolls targeting Canada. Now, this is an infographic by, what's this called? Yeah, it's called Infographic Rasid. Now it's gone, it's not there anymore. But they were actually targeting all the opponents of the Saudis. Anyone who is perceived to be the enemy will be targeted. So this is an example of one campaign by the Saudi trolls targeting Canada. Now, interestingly, when I show this to Canadians, they just don't get it. They say, yeah, that's interesting, but they don't see the shoe. The shoe is hitting the flag of Canada. For them, that's okay. Like, they don't get the cultural meaning behind the shoe hitting the flag. I had to translate this cultural message to them and say, oh yeah, oh okay. So what? They don't understand it, but huh?
The size of the flag.
Exactly, that's a good point. That's a good point. But the shoe thing, like, because we have it, it's very common in Arabic, ضربة بالحذاء or something like this, but it's not a thing in Canada. It's like not in the culture of the Canadians. But here, this is in English, not even in Arabic, showing you that the audiences targeted are Canadians who speak English. But this is not the only thing. State-run trolls were actually targeting human rights activists around the world. Anyone who opposes the government in Saudi Arabia. This is one example. I'm not sure whether you know him, Omar Aziz. Omar Aziz worked with Jamal Khashoggi in creating a Nahl al-Electroni, the electronic bees. Excellent. Yes, excellent. So there was this documentary about him. He lives in Montreal in Canada. His phone was also infected with a Pegasus virus, the Israeli company that creates the virus, because they worked with the Israelis in getting these types of spying tools. But notice, this is in English. Notice that again, it's in English, which means it's targeting Canadians. They are trying to show that Omar Aziz is a Daesh member, ISIS member, and should be expelled from Canada. And Canada should be punished for having terrorists on its own land, and so on. But that's how they do it. That's how they, let's say, proceed in their cyber operations. Or creating, let's say, fake accounts. This is from fake accounts. You remember when we talked about astroturfing? All of this is from fake accounts trying to promote the idea that human rights activists should not be allowed in foreign countries and should be expelled and sent back to their own homelands. And this is just one example, by the way. There are plenty of other examples of these cyber operations, including, for instance, attacking news organizations. This is CNN. And these are the Saudis also attacking CNN from time to time because of its critical news coverage of the country, like having these hashtags and post. The problem is we are limited. We are limited in terms of the data available. So we have data on Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Egyptians. This is one example from the Egyptians. It's very typical of what we see here in the Middle East. Whenever there is some kind of critical, let's say, assessment of a country, we see trolls attacking, saying, don't interfere in our affairs, you have no right, if you do, we will attack you. This is what we usually have. This is an example, a message to the whole world in different languages, don't interfere in our affairs. Let us alone, which means any kind of critical insight against any regime is viewed as an attack, a personal attack against the Sisi, against the political leaders. It's a really common message we see in every single country. Okay. Okay, so the discussion on trolls is really a lot. If you want, I can elaborate, but I have been actually extensively working on the way Arab trolls have been targeting audiences here and elsewhere. Iranians are also really active, also very smart in attacking or targeting audiences in the Middle East and abroad. So we have a lot of bad actors from different places. Interestingly, we don't have any data released by social media on US trolls. I'm quite sure there are, but they don't release that data, which shows you the bias of these social media companies. Still, with the available data that is publicly available could be discussed or could be further examined if anyone is interested. Okay. I hope I did not make it too long. I have one last case study about Jamal Khashoggi. Okay. Now, this is all part of a paper and as well as my book on cyber operations. As you know, it's a really sad event. Jamal Khashoggi was killed in Istanbul, inside the Saudi consulate. He entered and he did not get out. He was killed inside in a very brutal way. I was interested to see what was discussed by the Saudis about Jamal Khashoggi. Okay, so as I said, I used the publicly available data from Twitter on the trolls. So I searched for, and by the way, I'm talking about millions of tweets. I'm not talking about a few thousand. The social media company released millions of tweets. So the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Egyptians. So I only searched for Jamal Khashoggi. Like, did they mention Jamal Khashoggi before his death or after his death? Saudi Arabia, they released data from Saudi Arabia, Emirates, as well as Egypt. Three countries. Yeah, but Twitter did not release data from other countries, only 3 countries. Yeah. So I searched for Jamal Khashoggi. Before his death, October 2nd, 2018, he died. He was killed. And after his death. So this is what I found. So September 30th, October 1st, only one tweet. Suddenly, October 2nd, 195 tweets. Suddenly there was interest because he disappeared and, no one knows a lot about what happened. But I found something interesting. This is a detailed view of the tweets targeting Khashoggi on October 2nd. Now, this is the frequency of tweets on one day only, the day he disappeared. Now, why was this suspicious? Because the news about his death did not get published yet. But I found evidence from the Saudi trolls that they started talking about Khashoggi long before the news about his death. So he's still there, no one knows what is happening. Sometimes not even the news about his disappearance showed up. But the Saudi trolls started their campaigns. Now this is suspicious, because how could they know that there is something happening? That's why I focused on one day. And now I was really interested because I thought maybe this is the difference in timing. I even went back to Twitter, I contacted Twitter. What's the time that he used? They said UTC, United something, European timing. So I had that 2 times together. So make sure I was not wrong in my assessment. So this is what I found. October 2nd, there was a lot of discussion about Khashoggi just a few hours after his disappearance. This is probably more detailed. So he entered the consulate exactly 1:14 local time on October 2nd. The first tweet that referenced him was posted by the username on 4:41, which is about 6 hours later on. Again, his fiancée, Khadija, I think her name, was outside, still talking to the media. We don't know where he is, but they started the campaign, which means there is some kind of coordination. Qahtani was actually involved. Qahtani was working with NBC, Mohammed bin Abdel, Salman, بالضبط. He's part of it because he was running the Twitter campaign, but he was also in charge of investigating Jamal Khashoggi. So there is a coordination here, close coordination. Okay, let me move on. This is one of the first tweets. How come this is kidnapping and trying to cast doubt about the disappearance of Khashoggi, that this never happened, that he left. And that was the claim in the beginning. The Saudis wanted to create the facade, the appearance that Khashoggi left the consulate safely with no issue, and we have, as Saudis, we have nothing to do with his disappearance. It didn't work. Now, one of the live tweets that's still available is this. All the other tweets were deleted, as I said, because I used Saudi trolls. But this is one example of a tweet, and this is actually done by what they call paid users. Like you pay them money in order to send a certain hashtag. And I found reference in the dataset that I have examined that someone paid money to disseminate Fadah Jamal Khashoggi hashtag. So it's like a paid hashtag so that they encourage more people to distribute or disseminate this specific hashtag. It's a hashtag, a whole hashtag campaign. I'm talking about just a few hours after the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi. We don't know anything yet. So Fadah Jamal Khashoggi became the most trending in Saudi Arabia as a campaign, a whole campaign.
Yeah, but excuse me. Here, I believe this is a small account that has like 200, 300 followers. So they will use this hashtag just because it's trending, not because it's politically for use. This is what I meant to say about that data. This is data, but how we analyze it makes the difference. I see that this is he's promoting his store that sells iPhones, and he saw this is a trending hashtag, so he put it. He doesn't have to be paid to do that.
Could be. But in the data set that I can share with you the specific tweet in which someone said, I was paid to distribute this. Fadah Jamal Khashoggi. That person said, or something to the effect of, we were paid, or I was paid to distribute or to send. I get it, but I'm talking about the first references to Fadah Jamal Khashoggi hashtag. And I don't know, again, we talk about intentionality. I don't know really whether this is a paid or unpaid user, but as I mentioned before, I found indication, some evidence that some people were actually paid to distribute this hashtag. Now, let me show you the other hashtag campaigns that were used to discredit Jamal Khashoggi. I'm talking about a man who was killed. So why would you discredit a dead person, a dead person's reputation? This is actually what happened. This is all after his death. So we have definitely the first one, sorry, you know, in Arabic it should be the opposite, Fadah Jamal Khashoggi, so you have to read it the opposite. Masrahiyya Jamal Khashoggi itself. So they were talking about, oh, this is all fake, this is disinformation, this is not real, this is all like a play, it's not really happening. Masrahiyya Jamal Khashoggi became the second most prominent campaign. Erdogan was interesting. من قرد Erdogan, that was interesting, you know, monkey Erdogan. And أين جثة جمال خاشقجي, where is his dead body? And Turkey procrastinates regarding Khashoggi case. And this one is interesting. Erdogan, where is Jamal Khashoggi? Like blaming Turkey to be behind his disappearance. So all of it is fake. They knew it, of course, but it shows the kind of coordination between people posting these tweets and the people who actually killed Jamal Khashoggi. And I did a visualization also of the different campaigns, you know, just to show you the kind of timeline that happened. Some examples that I found to be still live are included here. This is from a tweet. They talk about how that Khashoggi left the consulate, and all of this is fake, orchestrated by Turkey and Qatar to accuse Saudi Arabia of killing Khashoggi. And also notice how they use visualization, numbers, maps, timing to show that we are right. And that's probably very, very clever, I think. Because if you see this, oh yeah, it looks like a really well-made or well-done research. Exactly. Okay. Other things they try to do is associating Jamal Khashoggi with Daesh and Al-Qaeda, like this one. He's wanted as a Muslim brother, as an accusation, and they also have infographics, really well-made infographics connecting Khashoggi with Muslim brothers or with secret terrorist groups, and also showing this image when he was in Afghanistan, by the way, sent officially by the Saudi government to Afghanistan. Or maybe referencing his interview with Osama bin Laden to show that he's a militant, even if he was killed, he deserved to be dead. Something like this. So again, connection. Something else that was, I think, worrying was the kind of sexist attacks against Khashoggi's fiancée. So have a look at this. Khadija, her name is Khadija, trying to make fun of her. Trying to make fun of her shape, trying to also show that she's fake, she's even a man, or that she works for the Qatari or the Turkish intelligence, and she is not his real fiancée. So it's really problematic because they try their best to show that they are right and that they are justified even if they have killed Jamal Khashoggi. Really problematic. Finally, my last slide, I promise. I know there is a lot. I found this last slide also interesting because the Saudi as well as the Emirati trolls were threatening people who were discussing Jamal Khashoggi on social media with punishment. They say, listen, if you spread rumors about Khashoggi, you will be penalized, you will be punished. So, القانون يتوعد مروجي الإشاعات about Khashoggi. Again, this is one way of silencing dissent, silencing any kind of opposition to the narrative of the official narrative of the Saudi government as well as the Emirati. Yeah, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer.
First, I'd like to thank you for such an informative session. It really was informative. I have a question because before I did a presentation about Russia and the propaganda that she created since like the USSR era, not only for like these days. So I have a question regarding this propaganda, and she started like decades ago. So. Why the international law and the international community are like silent and they do nothing about like preventing Russia from doing so? Because, for example, if we are talking about the Ukrainian like war and related to like the dispute, actually the Russia started to appear like a victim, and they know we are like victims, and what happened is related to Ukraine, and it's only like a response. So what is the role of the international law in order to like fight this propaganda and fake news?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's international relations question, not exactly media, but I'll try to answer. Why didn't they interfere in terms of military, I think you mean? Because Russia has nuclear weapons, that's why they don't mess with Russia. They are afraid of creating a new world war and of course a nuclear war. That will be disastrous for everyone. So they don't interfere. But the point about a victim is really interesting. This is probably propaganda and disinformation. Each side is trying to show they are the victim. Definitely the Ukrainians are the victims because they've been attacked. I mean, it's not the opposite. Russia is the belligerent country attacking another country. I'm not defending Ukraine, but I'm just saying that this is actually what happened. Russia invaded Ukraine. That's as simple as that. So in order to justify it, they are saying, yeah, we are victims, the Ukrainians are neo-Nazis attacking us. So to justify that invasion, they are trying to promote this kind of narrative. So in terms of media literacy, we have to really be aware about who is saying what and why. I think the why question is really important. Again, why is to justify the invasion of the invasion of Ukraine, and to show that they are the right side, the good guys. The others are the bad guys. And that's why I'm saying it's an information warfare. It's an ongoing information warfare that, and we are in the middle of it. So we always have to look at the two sides of the story. But the facts are facts. Russia invaded Ukraine. So we need to be sure that we get the picture right here. Interestingly, I went to Iraq, and there was an interview with the Russian ambassador in Baghdad. And he was actually talking about the same thing. Oh, these are only special, he called it special military operations, عمليات عسكرية خاصة. Seriously, you are invading a country. What do you mean by special military operations? And you are killing civilians. That's the problem. You are destroying the whole country. So there is no justification to do so. Okay? If you have a problem, you can go to the United Nations. That's where problems could be resolved, not through weapons. So, yeah.
Hello, I just want to ask a question. The international system is a weak system, and this is a case we see in a lot of cases. One of which, in the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization delayed the launch of their report about the cases of coronavirus. Does this mean that we should not trust the international organization, whereas we should focus on strengthening the big data organizations in the regional states, like although that we find that the big data organizations are not trusted a lot.
Sorry, what do you mean by big data organizations?
يعني حقوله باللغة العربية بركي بيكون أفضل. البيج داتا اورجانيزيشنز هن المنظمات يلي بالدول عم تاخذ مسؤولية تجميع المعلومات لحتى تبيع هيدي المعلومات للمنظمات الدولية. مثلا هذا مثلا براس ما عند مثل معين، بس هي هيك مثل كانت كورس اخذتها عن البيج داتا. فبنلاقي انه هول البيج داتا اورجانيزيشنز عم بيجمعوا بس معلومات، مثل مثلا هلا هو منه اورجانيزيشن but Facebook is doing so. He is gathering information to sell this information like other media platforms. طيب فينا نحن نعتبر انه منظمة الصحة العالمية لما تأخرت بتسليم تقرير انه عن نسبة الإصابات بالكورونا، هيدي مثل كأنه المنظمات العالمية عم تحاول تخفي شيء. نحن ما فينا نعتمد من جهة على المنظمات العالمية بهذا الكيس، وما فينا نعتمد على المنظمات الإقليمية بكيس ثانية، لأنه كمان في a lot of weakness انه ما بيكونوا trusted information.
ما أعرف أجاوب باللغة العربية بالإنجليزي مثل. أوكي. يعني أنا في رأيي الشخصي إنه من المهم إنه نثق ببعض المنظمات والجهات. يعني إذا انتهى الأمر بنا إننا لا نثق بأي جهة، فهذا يخلق مشكلة كبيرة. عفواً. إذا انتهى الأمر بنا إنه لا نثق بأي جهة، فسيخلق مشكلة كبيرة. يعني تخيلي إن أنت لا تثقين بأي شيء، مثلا ضمنها مثلا الماء الذي تشربيه. يعني كيف ممكن تعيشي؟ كيف ممكن أن تعيشي؟ فضروري أن نثق ببعض الأشياء، وإلا يعني يقتلنا القلق والتفكير. من ضمنها المنظمات الكبيرة، المنظمات المتحدة. يعني ليست هذه المنظمات منزهة، وليست يعني طبعا منظمات لا تخطئ كثيرا. يعني بالأفضل شيء ما فعلتها في المنطقة العربية وفي العراق وغير العراق وفي لبنان. لكن أظن أنها يعني تعاني من قلة التمويل وقلة الموارد. التأخير الذي حصل كان بسبب بعض الدوافع السياسية، لكن أعتقد أنها منظمة يعني باللغة الإنجليزية credible، يعني إيش credible؟ موثوقة بالضبط. منظمة موثوقة ويجب أن نثق بها، يعني لأنها منظمة صحة. يعني لكن بعض الحكومات تحاول أن تخفي، يعني الحكومة الصينية تحاول جهدها أن تخفي مثلا كيف بدأ الفيروس. لم تعطي كل المعلومات إلى الآن، لا نعرف بالضبط كيف بدأ الفيروس. يعني هذه بسبب بعض الحكومات، لأنه بها يعني مشاكل قانونية، بها أيضا بعض التعقيدات. ولهذا أنا في رأيي يعني لا أعتقد هنالك يعني نظرية مؤامرة من ناحية التأخير أو إخفاء المعلومات، لا، فقط إنه قلة الموارد. حقيقة يعني هذا يعني رأيي. هل جاوبتك؟ بالنسبة للبيج داتا، البيج داتا طبعا هو مهم. يعني بعض الشركات قد توفر هذه المعلومات إلى منظمة الأمم المتحدة، لكن ليست كل المعلومات صحيحة. يعني يجب أن، يعني أنا في رأيي أن ننظر إلى البيج داتا والنظر إلى السمول داتا as well، يعني المعلومات القليلة. يعني مثلا ضروري أنه نبحث في عدة مجالات إلى أن ما يكون عندنا تصور صحيح لما يجري على واقع الأرض، لأنه اعتمادنا فقط على مصدر واحد للمعلومات قد يؤدي بنا إلى أن نرى الحقيقة بشكل ربما يكون مشوه. ولذلك يجب أن نأخذ أو نستقطن المعلومات من عدة مصادر فيما يتعلق بالجائحة أو ما يتعلق بأي شيء بشكل عام، حتى بالبحث العلمي. يعني مثلا أنا في بحثي أخذ مصادر بيج داتا، بنفس الوقت أروح يعني مثل بالإنجليزي زوم إن، أنظر إلى المصدر نفسه وقارن وأفكر، وفي النهاية أنا أحاول أن أقدم ما أعتقد أنه هو الحقيقة. ربما أنا أخطأت، لكن أنا أبذل قصارى جهدي في هذا المجال. أرجو أنه جاوبتك.
Hello, Dr. Ahmed. I've got so many questions. If you could help me.
Sorry, yeah. I cannot see you.
I'm wondering about the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. Why special it's happened in Istanbul? And what's the 15 responsibles, Saudi, 15 responsible Saudi doing in Istanbul? And what is the basil of the black cop?
Okay, I don't know, that's what the Saudi
like
intelligence does.
I would like to know why special it's happened in Istanbul? Why Istanbul?
Because his fiancée was living there and he wanted to marry her, and he was engaged to her. He tried to do this in the US. He was asked to go to Istanbul to get the permission to marry his fiancée. That was like a trap in my mind. He went first, but he went first to the consulate, but was advised to return in a few other days until the application is processed. During that time, the hit squad, the assassination team, was invited to come in a special plane, and they conducted their operation. The Turkish intelligence was probably on top of it. They recorded everything. The recording was not released, but it was shared with the intelligence community, including the UN Special Envoy investigating the case. I'm not exactly sure the nature of your question, but the Saudis killed him. That's what I can say. They killed him.
Whenever it's happened, like they just delayed the investigation.
Who, the Saudis or the Turkish?
Yes, Saudis.
Of course.
Turkish.
Of course, it created a great deal of embarrassment for MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And now, until today, Biden does not want to talk to him because of the incident of Jamal Khashoggi. You know why? Because Jamal Khashoggi worked for or wrote for the Washington Post. In America, Washington Post is the elite, it's the top newspaper. And it's created a great deal of tension. The United States really wants Saudi Arabia to be its ally. But suddenly we have this problem creating some kind of internal pressure on Biden and his administration. So they're in a conflict. Should they talk to MBS or not? That's the problem they have. Now they are trying to approach him because of the conflict in Ukraine. They're trying to say, hey, increase the oil production, we are in big trouble, but it's a really, really delicate situation. They don't like MBS, and the Americans don't like him, but they don't have a choice. Probably they'll end up talking to him. Yeah. So Jamal Khashoggi is one journalist, by the way. I mean, unfortunately, it didn't happen with Shireen Abu Akleh. Like Shireen Abu Akleh like we don't see the same kind of attention about Shirin Abu Akleh. I think Shirin Abu Akleh did far more what Jamal Khashoggi did in terms of reporting. What did Jamal Khashoggi do? Like really, he wrote a few articles in the Washington Post. Exactly, where Jamal Abu Akleh was in the field, talking, risking her life every single day. But what do we see? Look at the difference. That's the double standards I'm talking about here when it comes to the attention. And besides, Shirin Abu Akleh worked for Al Jazeera. In the West, they hate Al Jazeera. They regard it as a terrorist, probably a channel. Whereas Khashoggi wrote for Washington Post, yeah, that's the elitists, that's us. So we see here the double standards, but it's a long story. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. So, yes, sure. Yeah, I'm open any time. By the way, if you have any questions, I'm here. I'm here for you if you have questions. Anyone, please. Yeah. Do I choose who to add? Really? I'm important? As you want. Please, yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your informative lecture. First of all, I want to ask what tools did you use for collecting the data and mining the big data? Also, are these data available for as open source or as open? Anyone can access this data from Twitter, from other sources. Another thing that you mentioned that you are working also on small data. Is it negligible data? For example, when you mentioned the case of the protest, the movement in Canada about the cars blocking the highways, the Arabic tweets were only 1,300, while the English were 1,400,000. Proportionally, it's very small to make a judgment on it.
Yeah. So I'll start with the Ottawa protest, and then I'll move forward. I'm not making any judgments. I'm just showing you who is mostly discussing the protest. And I showed that it's number 9, which is still prominent. We have hundreds of languages around the world, right? And Arabic is number 9 when it comes to discussion of this protest. It's happening thousands of miles away from here. So that's why I found it to be interesting. And now, of course, English is a global language, and it's the first language spoken in Canada and in the United States. So it makes sense that it's the top language. But still, it's significant. Even a few thousand in my mind is significant in terms of the discussion of a faraway protest. And now, going back to your first question about data. Data, of course, it depends on which, let's say, study you are referring to. But if you attend my workshop, I'll probably be able to talk more about how to get the data and analyze it. So, all the data that I have analyzed is publicly available, and you could actually collect it if you want using the right tools, including the trolls dataset. The dataset I showed you on pictures, they're actually available one click away from you. But talking about terabytes of data, you know terabyte? It's like 1,000 gigabyte, and I'm talking about 10 terabyte of data. Yeah, I used a supercomputer to process it. I'm not joking, really. Supercomputer. You know, it's really hard, but it's manageable. 1 minute, yes, please. Yeah, please, yes. Okay, you have the mic.
أنا بشكر حضرتك على المحاضرة الهائلة دي. متابع أعمال حضرتك وخصوصا في السايبر وورفير، فعندي سؤال بخصوص الكيس ستادي اللي ليها علاقة بالسايبر وورفير ما بين روسيا وأوكرانيا. حضرتك عارف إن روسيا ليها تاريخ طويل من سايبر أتاكس تجاه جورجيا، أوكرانيا، بلاك إنرجي، هجمات كتير قبل الانفيجن، وخصوصا في المجال ده بالذات. متخصصين كتير اعتقدوا ان بعد الانفيجن في اوكرين ان هتحصل سايبر وورفير مدمره من روسيا تجاه اوكرانيا. راي حضرتك لغايه دلوقتي ليه روسيا ما خدتش الاجراء ده، خصوصا انها ليها سوابق كتير من 2008؟
أنا في تصوري أن هناك كثير من المبالغة فيما يتعلق بقدرات الحكومة الروسية في مجال التهكير أو الهاكينج. أعتقد هناك كثير من المبالغة بهذا الخصوص، لكن هم كانوا يعني نشطين جدا في تهجير مواقع أخرى خاصة في الدول المجاورة لهم اللي هم يجدوها معادية لسياسات روسيا. ولهذا كان التوقع أنه حيكون هجمات متعددة لم تحدث إلى الآن، ولا أعتقد سوف تحدث مثل ما كان يتوقعه الآخرين. لكن كلامك صحيح، وعلى فكرة بعض الهجمات كانت أيضا موجهة إلى المنطقة العربية. شكرا. Okay, I think I'm more than happy to talk to you, but I think time is up, and really appreciate your time and interest in these topics. Okay, thank you very much.